How good's that? Test of a good slice of brisket that it can hold its own weight. Oh, tender. Hi, I'm Schuey, and in this video I'm going to show you how easy it is to smoke a brisket in a Weber Kettle. This is a no fuss, easy cook, and if you haven't smoked brisket before, you will after watching this. So just sit back, grab a drink or two, and let's get into it. I'm lucky enough to be smoking this 7.7 kilogram WX by Ranges Valley 5+ score Wagyu brisket that the good people out at Gippsland Premium Meats sent my way to cook. First up, just putting the gloves on because I'm not a grot and I've got to keep touching my camera. So I'll take these off, move my camera, put on a fresh pair of gloves. All right, flip it over, slice through. As you can see, this brisket is huge. It's bigger than my chopping board, so much so I've actually just ordered a new one. Now, always start with a sharp knife and always cut away from you. We're gonna start by removing this big, thick piece of decal fat. It is thick, heavy, and will not render down in our cook. And as I go around trimming the brisket, I'm gonna round off the edges. And next up, we're just gonna start removing all of the thinner bits of fat and the silver skin. Just take your time. It's easy enough with a sharp knife because you can actually get it under the silver skin. And angling the blade up a little bit makes things a lot easier. Now, how aggressive you go on the trim is really up to you, but you definitely want to remove all of that silver skin. Spin that around so you can see it. And again, any sharp edges, you just want to round them off a little bit. And for a home trim, I'm happy with that. We're just going to flip the brisket over and we're just going to take a little bit of this fat cap off, but there's not a lot. Slice into it. Again, remember, knife always away from you. Now this is a softer fat. You do not have to remove it all, but you don't really want lots of it there. Again, this comes down to a personal preference. Now, I have to make this fit a 57 centimeter Weber Kettle, so I am going to start trimming it and shaping it a little bit more. I'll spin it around so you can see what I'm doing. And these thin bits, they're going to dry out, so we may as well just trim them down now. That's better. Now we've got this gnarly bit here, so I may as well just trim that off now, shape it up, and also that bit. Just keep shaping it, rounding off those edges. Now there are two main reasons why we shape a brisket. As I've already mentioned, one is to fit it into the smoker, and this one's going to be a Weber today. And two, we just want it nice and aerodynamic so the heat and the smoke roll over our brisket. I think just a little bit here and we're pretty much done. Oh, one last little bit. Again, it's personal preference. You keep picking at it, you're just going to keep trimming bits off. But that I'm happy with. Now, if you've already pre-liked this video, cheers, much appreciated. What good is a brisket if we don't season it? We'll be keeping this cook simple and stress-free. So we're going to be using our own rub, and there's a formula for it. 2 parts coarse black pepper, 1 part kosher salt, and 1/2 part granulated garlic. Did you notice I said parts? You can use whatever you want to measure this out. Teaspoons, buckets, I don't care, make as much as you want. And once you have your rub made, apply it to the bottom of the brisket first. Why, I hear you ask? Because the top part's our pretty part and we'll finish on that. Don't forget the sides. Now flip it over and do the top. Did you notice I didn't use a binder? That's because I don't think it needs it. But by all means, if you want to go wasting mustard, go for it. But don't come blaming me when you don't have any for your hot dogs. Today, I'm going to be using a 57 centimeter Weber Kettle, and I'm going to be utilizing the snake method because I want to be smoking at temperatures around 135 to 150 degrees Celsius. This is easy enough to do by adding a row of briquettes around the outer edge of the charcoal grate. Then make a second row, making sure it is touching the first row. And now add a top row. And as you can see, I've made the snake pretty much go around the entire charcoal grate. I'd rather have a lot more unlit fuel there just in case I need it, because trying to add it while it's alight is pretty hard. We can also add a foil pan to the bottom Smoking wood goes on next. I'm going to use some cherry and some iron bark. Just remember, when placing wood chunks in, leave a 50mm gap between each piece because the wood burns quicker than the briquettes. Now lastly, you want to light up some briquettes. Now normally I'd start with about 12. Because I want to go a little bit hotter today, I threw in 14. I've lit them up, and a lot of people ask me, how do I light up such a small quantity? I use one of these little utensil holders, and you can pick them up from most supermarkets and other stores. You just dump that at the start of the snake. Then we can just add the grill back in place, and adding an ambient temp probe on the opposite side of the lit fuel so we can track the Weber's temp. Put the lid back on, making sure the lid vent's wide open, and we want that lid vent also on the opposite side of our lit fuel. We're going to watch the temp, and as it rises and gets close to our target temp, we're going to close down those bowl vents. You know what this would be a good time for? Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. While you're there, hit that bell button. That bell button's going to allow you to be notified every time I throw on some more food. The Weber's at temp now, and we can get our brisket on. Now we want to monitor the internal temp of this brisket while we're cooking it, so it's better off to put the probe in now. That way the lid is only off for a short time. So just insert an internal temp probe. You can put one in the point and one in the flat if you want. I think one's enough. Now when placing the brisket in the Weber, you want the thickest part facing the heat source. This is going to just protect this thinner part. Put the lid on, remembering to keep the lid vent over our food. That way the heat and the smoke is getting drawn over that brisket. And just set the internal temp probe to 75 degrees Celsius. This isn't our finished temp. We just want to monitor it up until then. Now just leave that alone for a couple of hours and go and find something else to do. The brisket's been in for 3 hours now. It's currently sitting at 55 degrees internally. I just want to check it and make sure none of the edges are drying up too much. Our snake's burnt around to here, so we just want to adjust the grate and move our brisket around a bit. And the edges are looking a little bit dry, so I think we'll give them a spritz. And I'll be using my special spritzing recipe today. And once we've spritzed it, just pop the lid back on. Now, for those of you wondering, my special spritzing recipe is 1 part water to 1 part water. The internal temp of the brisket has just reached 75 degrees Celsius, and that bark is looking really good. So it's finally time to boat it in some foil. And for those wondering how we pick up hot food just with these thin gloves on, we've got these cotton gardening gloves underneath them. Put the brisket in the center and just roll up the foil to the edge of the brisket, effectively making a foil boat. Now just find a river and let it sail away, or just pop it back into the Weber until it's probing with no resistance. So we are 7.5 hours into the cook. How good does that look? It's reading 96 degrees internally, but more importantly, it is probing with no resistance. And it's got that nice jelly wobble. Now, any normal brisket will be at this stage anywhere between 93 and 99 degrees Celsius, but don't go by temp alone. Use that as a measurement, and after you reach, say, 93 degrees, see how it probes and just keep checking it. It is time to hold our brisket. Keep all those juices. We're gonna wrap it up in a couple of layers of foil. Now we can wrap this up in an old towel. Then we're going to grab an esky and we're going to put another old towel down the bottom for some insulation, and we want to put our brisket on top of that. Get it in there. Another towel on top. Lid on. And I'm going to let this sit aside for 2 hours. At least an hour, but 2 is better. You can hold a brisket for a long time doing it like this. I've held a brisket for up to 6 hours and it was still piping hot. So I recommend always allowing extra time to hold your brisket, because you can hold it longer, you just can't speed up the cooking process. Today I'm smoking at temps of 140 degrees Celsius. And all up, our cook, including the whole time of 2 hours, is going to take 9.5 hours. Or, for those of you who like to use my beer timer, you're looking at a 19 beer cook. I hope everyone's happy. We're back on the long beer timers again. The time has come. Let's get the brisket out of the esky and have a look at it. Oh, wow, how good does that look? Now, using the largest knife you've got, preferably a brisket slicer, you want to cut the brisket across the grain. How good does that look? It is literally just oozing out with juice. I couldn't ask for a better brisket. And then all you want to do is start slicing the rest of it down to 10 to 12 mil thick slices. I think we all know I'm going to say it. Brisket this good should be illegal. As always, cheers for watching.